I think one of the reasons I actually reached out to you, probably why we initially reached out to you was I was following your posts about how do I say, fake news, mistruths, misreporting, false reporting, and the reason,
coverage.
the coverage, right? And the thing I'm reaching out to you is, okay, I'm not sure whether it was the coverage previously, but I have in the past, I have seen you publicly call out. I don't know whether it was still the coverage lah. I don't want
It
to
was the
mislead.
coverage.
It was the coverage, but I've seen you in the past years, like calling them out flat out on Facebook, like calling them out for clearly lying lah. There's no other word for it. Like, clearly lying in the news, right? And the first time I saw it a few years ago, I was like, dude, people do this. Like, people actually can flat out. You hear all this fake news, and you just think it's an idiocy of the Americans, right? And then I was like, oh, you can do that over here. And I thought, okay, like you call them out, probably it's done and over with, right? And you kind of see that it's like a business model for them. It looks like, and it looks like it's perpetuating, right? So for the uninitiated, which probably I'm the uninitiated, right? What was it? What actually happened? Just to give a simple overview, just to understand.
Okay. I think it's very important to first analyze the sources of fake news. There's two types of fake news out there, in my opinion. There's fake news without there's fake news that's purely for profit, and there's fake news with an agenda.
Okay.
So fake news with an agenda is like, what's happening in the US now to swing the election. They publish news that is obviously trying to make the Democrats look bad and trying to make the Republicans look good. So that's one type of fake news where, it's insidious and, it has a very clear agenda to move an election, to get you to buy something, whatever, or to turn you off a competitor's product, so on and so forth. Now, the other type of fake news is a little bit more confusing for the general person. Like, something like, 3 Malays rob a Chinese woman in Ampang or whatever, right? That type of fake news is arguably more dangerous because do you know why they write stuff like that?
I suppose to get the clicks lah. I mean, from their point of view, it's controversial. It shares. It gets.
But why not do real news then? Why do fake news?
I don't know. If I were to assume, it's to get to be the first to report to something that doesn't really exist lah. I mean, I don't know. If I'm assuming, I would say that lah. Just to be controversial, it's.
Yeah. So fake news isn't tied to reality. It's a lot easier to create something newsworthy. Right? You're not tied to reality. You don't need to check your facts. You don't need whatever. You can just write whatever fuck you want, right? So it is for that reason that fake news, I think there was a stat that said on average, a piece of fake news has 3 times the traction of real news. Right? So if you're creating a site that is monetized based on advertising and links, and allow me to tell you first that advertising on that kind of level is very, very cheap.
Okay.
So you need a lot of clicks. Okay. So we looked at this early days with Cilisos. Hey, can we put Google ads or whatever? You talk to any major news publication out there, nobody is surviving on Google ads. You can't survive on Google ads. It's too little. But if you didn't need reporters, if you just had a bunch of people writing up shit in a room and pushing it and getting clicks, then it makes a little bit more business sense, which is effectively, I believe, I don't know for sure, how the coverage has survived all these years.
I mean, I know there's a lot of clickbait sites, not news sites, clickbait sites where they just buy domains and they're like, for heart medicine and all that, and they just by sheer you Google search and traffic and all that, and they make their AdSense from that. I know there's a little bit of a black hat trick that people use just to make money from Google, right? AdSense and traffic and all that. But I've never actually connected that this tactic would be used for what they claim to be a genuine news site lah. And I found that very perplexing lah, in the sense that, man, you can get away with doing this, like that was something I found very perplexing in the sense that.
Yeah, so I went on a trip to Singapore, and we had the privilege of interviewing a lot of Singapore ministers, and one of the ministers was a minister of information. So at that point in time, Singapore had just launched a fake news law. And the standard argument from a journalist to a politician about a fake news law is that we don't need it because we have defamation laws. If someone's telling a lie, then we can just sue them for telling a lie. That doesn't work with fake news. So this Singapore minister, he actually said that you can't use defamation laws when there's no one that actually got hurt. There's no, locus standi and whatever you call it, right? So it's really insidious. Let's say I publish an article tomorrow, 5 Indian men raped a Malay girl or whatever it is, right? They're all fake. There is nobody to initiate a suit for defamation. But the harm is done to society. And that's kind of why you need a fake news law of some sort.
But if I recall correctly, and you would be the person to know in the sense that before the 2018 elections, our elections, Najib and gang also came up with our own fake news law, basically to stifle people from talking about 1MDB and basically marking even real news as fake news so that they can get you in trouble with the courts and whatnot. Right? There was something like that. Right?
Yeah. There was an act, a fake news act, but I don't think they actually
enforced it. Is it?
Enforced it on anybody that was covering something that wasn't that was 1MDB. I'm not sure about this. I need to check, but I don't think they actually enforced
it was quite prevalent in the sense that I would see billboards sponsored by like multinationals like Telecom and all that, talking about the I can't remember the exact Malay terminology they use about spreading fake news before the election, right? And
So first of all, I mean, it's been repealed as of end of last year already.
Is it? I thought it was part of the manifesto to repeal, and then Old Man Mahathir said that, hey, we need a fake news law.
No, it's been repealed already.
Okay.
Yeah, it's.
But again, like you mentioned, I don't necessarily think it's bad. But if it is abused to stifle free speech, then it's bad, lah. But
the bigger problem is always when Najib was in power and everyone said, oh, our democracy has failed, we need better laws and blah blah blah. Look at what's happening in the US. You have all the laws in the world. You had years, decades, centuries to fine tune those laws, and this can still happen.
Yeah, and to the point that when people talk about the US and they say, oh, it's just Trump, right? Everything is just Trump, and the thing that troubles me, in my observation, is the fact that we have all these checks and balances in place, and the US has all these checks and balances in place, from your senators, and they have their house and all that, and I realized that at the end of the day, they don't care as long as they want a Republican president. All the checks and balances doesn't mean anything, right? The Supreme Court now looks like it's going to be majority Republican, so it's basically towing the party lines. And I think to a lesser extent, or maybe to a similar extent, even in Malaysia, that was kind of what our AG chambers at one point and our judiciary system was all kind of, the system was there, and the system was designed to stop any kind of corruption and misuse of public funds and all that, but the systems were abused, in the sense that so that's the funny thing is, at the end of the day, if somebody really wants to do something, and everybody in the US's case, the whole Republican machinery is okay with it, right? Because the Republicans, if they choose, tomorrow they can have Trump impeached and out right before the election. If they wanted, right? They have the power is there, but there's no will, in the sense. So it is not so much the system. I think in a perfect world, even our systems here are supposed to work, right? Our rule of law is supposed to work, right? But the executioners of that, the people who are sitting in those positions of power and enforcing, don't always do what we think is the right thing to do,
I think the problem is that our institutions are weak and people no longer have faith in them. So, I mean, you take something like the Fake News Act, right? And it could be something really good if you trusted the government, but nobody trusts the government. So they're not going to want to give the government more tools to perceptually, what's the word for it? Clamp down on them.
Yeah. And I think especially
if you trusted the government, it's a totally different thing. Like what's happening in Singapore, I don't think they have huge objections to the Fake News Act, except the Singapore government does have a reputation of clamping down on media outlets. So,
yeah. I mean, there is a perception of, I would say, a lot more transparency I'd say perception and transparency and discourse from on the Singapore side of things, like especially in politics and stuff like that. There seems to be some kind of decorum and dignity in their town halls and their parliament sittings. It's not so pasamalamish lah. Like, sometimes.
But I mean, what I heard from the politicians that actually joined the government for the first time in 2018, I spoke to some of them, and they said that it's very hard to do the right thing in a system that is systemically corrupt. Like everybody wants a piece of something, and to do that, you need to provide something lah.